Rachel Reeves is trapped. The UK economy is beginning to crash. On June 11th, 2025, Chancellor Rachel Reeves delivered her first major spending review, outlining Labour's economic vision. However, unlike traditional budgets, Reeves opted not to involve the Office for Budget Responsibility, meaning no independent forecasts were published alongside the announcement. Instead, all figures came directly from the Treasury, raising concerns about transparency and scrutiny. The government did include a zero-based review of departmental budgets, but this is an internal exercise rather than the kind of external oversight typically expected. Critics have likened the move to marking your own homework, with Reeves effectively taking full responsibility for economic narrative and any future fallout if projections don't hold up. Reeves's decision comes at a time when global economic instability makes the Chancellor's job particularly difficult. Plans to stimulate growth have repeatedly been disrupted by external shocks, the latest being the Israel-Iran conflict, which has pushed up global oil prices and threatens to raise petrol costs in the UK. That could reduce household spending and dent consumer confidence. While these challenges don't absolve the Treasury of responsibility, they help explain the difficult context in which economic policy is currently being made. In her June 2025 spending review, Chancellor Rachel Reeves described her fiscal rules as non-negotiable and ironclad.
The Conservatives' fiscal rules guaranteed neither stability nor investment, and that is why I changed them. My fiscal rules are non-negotiable, and they are the foundation of stability and of investment.
The government has pledged no increases to borrowing, no rises in income tax, national insurance or VAT, and no major changes to its spending plans. While this signals a commitment to fiscal discipline, it also limits the government's flexibility. If the economy deteriorates through higher inflation, weaker growth, or global instability, Reeves has left herself few options. She can't borrow more, won't raise key taxes, and has already committed to specific spending priorities. This approach effectively bets on economic stability, a risky move in a volatile global environment. Any unexpected shock could force the Chancellor to backtrack, leaving her politically exposed. Critics argue the strategy leaves the Treasury reactive rather than adaptive, and opposition parties are already preparing to highlight any deviation from Reeves's commitments.
Mr. Speaker, our country is now vulnerable to even the smallest changes in the bond markets. Should we face a sudden external shock, we have no fiscal firepower left with which to respond, all thanks to the Right Honourable Lady's choices. So can I ask the Chancellor, will she be open about what she has done? Will she admit that she has made a conscious choice to borrow more and to accept higher debts? Does she accept this means interest rates and mortgages will be higher than they would otherwise have been, as the OBR themselves have said? And given she continues to claim that she has brought stability to the public finances, can I ask her what on earth her definition of stability is?
The truth is, Rachel Reeves's political survival now rests with the OBR, an institution she didn't invite to this month's spending review, but will need desperately in the autumn.
And Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor must be delighted that she does not have to face a new OBR forecast today. Because if she did, she would have to set out how she will fund her humiliating U-turn on winter fuel payments, having already blown the savings on buying off her trade union paymasters last year.
If the OBR's next report shows that tax receipts or economic growth are falling behind expectations, Reeves has no cushion. She's built her entire strategy on optimistic assumptions. The Financial Times put it plainly in an article titled, "Rachel Reeves will be forced to raise taxes this autumn." Why? Because the only reason she hasn't had to make even tougher decisions already is that the OBR, until now, has been more optimistic than most other forecasters. In March, the OBR projected UK GDP growth between 2024 and 2029 would be 0.8% higher than what other institutions expected. James Smith from the Resolution Foundation warned that if this optimism fades, it could be disastrous. A downgrade would expose a much larger structural deficit than anticipated, and that would mean tax hikes. What makes this even more precarious is the timing. By the time the OBR releases its next full forecast, it may be too late to reverse the course without significant political cost. Reeves's fate could depend on just a few decimal points in growth figures. And, unfortunately for Reeves, the cracks in the economy are already beginning to show. The UK jobs market is showing signs of strain. Between March and May 2025, job vacancies fell by 63,000, marking the 35th consecutive quarterly decline. Unemployment also edged up from 4.5% to 4.6%. Since Rachel Reeves' autumn budget, over 250,000 jobs have been lost. Just days before her June spending review, HMRC reported that payroll employment dropped by 109,000 in May, the largest monthly fall since the height of the COVID pandemic. Business groups have partly blamed the government's £25 billion increase in employer national insurance, which took effect in April and impacted over 1 million firms. The weakening labour market poses challenges for workers. Fewer job opportunities, pressure on wages, and rising uncertainty. It also undermines the Chancellor's message that the UK economy is on a stable path to recovery. And it's not just the labour market. On June 12th, the day after Reeves' speech, the ONS revealed that UK GDP shrank by 0.3% in April, a steeper fall than forecast. The services sector is slowing, manufacturing is in decline, and the overall economy is showing signs of contraction. For businesses and households, this signals weaker demand, reduced investment, and growing financial pressure. The key question now is what happens when the OBR returns to the spotlight this autumn. Unlike the June spending review, the autumn budget will require full independent scrutiny. The Office for Budget Responsibility will assess the government's forecasts for growth, tax revenues, borrowing, and public spending. And if the numbers don't stack up, the consequences for Rachel Reeves could be significant. With borrowing and major tax rises ruled out, the Chancellor's options are limited. If the OBR downgrades growth or inflation hits harder than expected, Reeves may be forced to either break her fiscal rules or find new sources of revenue, likely through spending cuts or targeted tax changes. Economists warn this rigid approach designed to build trust could backfire. A credibility gap could open up if the government is seen to be boxed in or forced to reverse course. And while opposition parties will be quick to capitalise on any U-turns, the bigger risk for Reeves may be public frustration, especially if the economic strategy fails to translate into visible improvements for households and services. Even a slight downgrade in the OBR's forecasts this autumn could trigger a major fiscal rethink. Reeves may be left with little choice but to cut spending or introduce less visible tax changes, despite having ruled out both. There is, however, one potential source of relief. The OBR has historically been more optimistic than other forecasting institutions. Back in March, it projected UK GDP growth for 2024 to 2029 to be 0.8 percentage points higher than the average forecast elsewhere. That optimism gave the government some extra fiscal headroom, and Reeves has so far benefited from it. If the OBR maintains its upbeat outlook, Reeves could avoid immediate difficult decisions. But relying on that optimism carries risks. Economists warn it's not a long-term plan, it's a short-term bet. James Smith of the Resolution Foundation has said that if the OBR revises down its estimates of long-term growth, the government may suddenly face a much larger structural deficit, prompting urgent action. And if that happens, Reeves's commitment to ironclad fiscal rules could become politically costly, especially if she's forced to abandon them under pressure. So what happens next? Attention now turns to the autumn budget and the OBR's independent forecasts. If the projections remain steady, Reeves may get through the year with her strategy intact. But if growth is revised down or revenues disappoint, she'll face a tough choice: break her fiscal rules or walk back tax promises. Either move carries political risk. Having built her credibility on discipline and certainty, Reeves is now constrained by her own red lines, and by economic forecasts she can't control. The next few months will be critical both for her policies and her political future. This is Eureka. Stay informed, stay curious.